I'll open up with a quick comment for everybody. Appreciate everyone being here. I think I said something similar last year about this is a really exciting time of year with the draft coming up, with our players back in the building, new coaching staff. So it's really good to kind of feel the vibe of the team, seeing the guys in the lunchroom, seeing them in the locker room. It's good to have players back in the building. This building gets a little stale without the 70 right now, or going to be 90 players walking around the facility, introducing themselves to new people that are working here. So it's been really good the last week and a half of having those guys back. So I want to open up with that. I think secondly, just wanted to say a thank you to everyone that's involved in the draft process. The whole draft process lasts over, I've said it a couple different times, it's over a year for us. To kind of do all the research on the players that we're considering. And I think it really starts from top to bottom in the organization. I'd say everybody in football operations has a small role in the draft preparation. Obviously some people more than others, but anybody that works in our football operation has a small part in it. I want to thank everyone for their hard work. Especially with Kyle O'Brien, Lance Newmark, Dave Sears on the scouting side, and the entire college scouting department, pro scouting department. It's a lot of information. It takes a lot of people doing their jobs well, a lot of people with hard work, dedication, time on the road, long meetings, long drives. You guys have a lot of hotel nights. I think my scouts have a lot more than you guys do. So I want to give a shout out to those guys. They work their butts off all year. And I really, I used to be one of those guys, so I know what it takes. I know what kind of grind it is. And really happy with how the staff kind of came together with the new coaching staff, kind of got on the same page, and working towards next Thursday. So with that, I'll open it up.
Bob, you've always kind of talked about your philosophy being best player available, but with also an eye on needs as well. Is this a good draft in that regard, where there's some guys maybe with some talent, some positions of depth at some areas where you think maybe you want to bolster?
Yeah, I think it's well-rounded. I think you look across the draft board, there's good depth at all the positions. I think it's at the typical positions. I think corner has one really large group of guys. You can get a good player at any portion of the draft. Receivers really deep. I think offensive line is deep. You can go across the board. I don't want to single out one or two, but it's a good draft. I think, as in many other years, there's probably a really cream of the crop top group that's probably in the say 8 to 12 range. And then after that, you got to really kind of hone in on guys that you fit your system. You've done a lot of work on, and kind of go from there.
How much of the work you've done, in your first 2 years of building the roster, building depth, has maybe allowed you to maybe isolate certain positions or not in this year's draft, but it was sort of building to year 3?
Yeah, I don't want to isolate any one position or two positions. I think, with the way the roster is today, I don't think I'm in a position to reach for any position of so-called need. I think, we're looking for good football players, looking for big, strong, tough, competitive guys that are going to help us win. So I'm not eliminating any position.
Your first couple first-round picks have been guys with high floors, maybe not splashiest positions, but really cornerstone positions, I guess. Mm-hmm. When you're building through the draft like you guys want to do, what's like the number one thing that you want to or need to get out of that first-round pick, I guess?
I'd say there's a couple things. Playmaking and dependability would be two things. You want dependable players in this program. You want, obviously, if you're taking them in the first round, they should be good players, right? Or I shouldn't be standing up here. But I think dependability is something that's really key with, durability, ability to learn, competitive nature. Does he love football, passion, all the things that we talk about on a daily basis when we talk about players and the guys we want to add to this organization. So I think if I had to pick a couple words, that'd be it.
When you're looking at drafting a player, how much do you look at, is he the best fit for us over the next 3 years? You're not necessarily just drafting somebody for this year. I guess my question is, how many years do you kind of project and look at age of other players, contract situations, that kind of thing?
Yeah, all that stuff goes into, how we kind of classify our needs internally. Where we think guys are going to be moving on, or are they going to be extended, how we think those things are going to go in the next, I'd say, 6 months to really 18 months down the road. We kind of look that far. Not only guys are going to be unrestricted free agents after this year, but also the following year. So there's a really good balance there that we have to talk about and kind of envision our needs, not just for today, but like you said, in the years ahead.
What's the most interesting thing of prospects? You talk to so many prospects. What's the most interesting thing you learned about prospects?
I mean, I've learned a lot about the prospects.
Is there one thing you're like, whoa, I had no idea, or?
There's always something, I'd say a little, you find out in the individual meetings you have, whether it's at the Senior Bowl or the Combine or individual workouts. I don't think I want to get anything specific right now, but I think you always pull one or two things out from a one-on-one. You know, it's very different from, you know, I'm sitting in the office during the year and I get out to do, you know, I'd say a dozen to 20 colleges during the season. So I have to read a lot of reports. The reports are coming in every Monday or Tuesday. You know, they come in this PDF that's like, you know, hundreds of pages, and I'm trying to sort through, trying to read everything during the year. And that paints a pretty good picture to start with, but until you sit across from someone and really start asking them pointed questions, because really the scout's job is to talk to people at the school in and around the player. They don't have access to the player. So there's only a certain number of questions that you really need to ask on a one-on-one level that you can get an answer on. So I think there's certain things that come out. You always learn something, and I think it's an important part of the process.
Of those hundreds of pages you get a week, how many maybe guys do you earmark per week of saying, yeah, I do want to sit down with that guy one-on-one, or yeah, I need to follow up on X or Y?
Yeah, I kind of wait until we have a set of meetings in December that all the scouts come to Detroit for about 10 days, and we kind of go through the whole draft board, and that's kind of where we kind of narrow down who we want to spend more time with.
You guys lost Swanson in free agency. You signed a couple of guys in free agency. How do you evaluate your need on the interior of the offensive line?
You know, I think we have guys that are competitive, that have position versatility. You know, Grant's played multiple positions. You know, TJ's really locked in at one spot. I think the other guys, you know, Joel Dahl has position flexibility. Kenny Wiggins has position flex. You know, Wesley Johnson, who we signed, has position flex. So I think out of those guys, that we have guys that can fill multiple roles, and we're going to put them out there and see what the best five. I think our thing is we're going to play the best five players, no matter what position, as long as they kind of are able to do that specific role.
The analysts say this is a very, very good class at that position, interior offensive line. How do you evaluate the class, and when it comes to using a first-round pick on that position, what's your philosophy?
Yeah, if he's a good football player and he's at or near top of the board, I have no problem taking an interior offensive lineman. And I'd say in this year's class, there are a number of them. I think it's a pretty well-rounded class, guys that have some position flex, guys that are maybe guards only or centers only. So I think there is a good mix. I'd say it's maybe a little deeper than the last 2 years, but not significantly.
How would you, I guess, characterize the value of character with player acquisition, and maybe how has that evolved for you in your first few years in the general manager role?
I think it's always been important, and it continues to be so. I think that's one thing that we take very seriously around here, and I think, you know, we want to draft good players, we want to draft good people, and I think you know, so far I'd say for the most part we've done a good job there the last 2 years doing that, and we look forward to doing it again.
When you set up the board, is it point value? Let's say hypothetically 2 players have the same amount of points. Then you say, wait a second, I got to go with the need here if they're equal value, or that never happens?
I would say it does happen occasionally. Yeah, it's kind of a number system per se. And yeah, you got to kind of weigh all the things. You got to look at all the different factors. They might have the same grade as a football player, but maybe say their medical grade's a half a point off. Okay, and that's something that you discuss. And then obviously team need and who you have and who you think might be there around later. So a lot of the conversations, honestly, I think I've said this maybe 2 years ago. A lot of the conversation of who to take, especially when you get into second, third, fourth, fifth rounds, is draft strategy. Okay, well, I probably should take this guy in the second round because there's no chance he's getting to the third round. Where, you know what, that other guy, he might be there in the third round. And that's where kind of our team needs analysis that our pro department does comes really into play about, you know, I'll turn around and ask those guys, okay, well, you know, this guy, who has he visited with? What teams are interested in him? Okay, they already picked this round. They don't have a pick next round. It's an inexact science, but those are the kind of questions that I ask continuously during the weekend.
I'm going to follow up of what Kyle asked about the interior linemen. Zone and man schemes. Is there a difference between the players that you look for in that? And I don't know, Jeff Davidson obviously played at Denver where they had that, so there's all this projection. I know you want to give away what you're going to run.
Yeah.
But does that factor into who you take in those spots?
Yeah, I think scheme fit is important. I wouldn't just say the offensive line, but any position. But I think when you're looking at offensive linemen in particular, you know, if you're talking about a zone scheme, and I'm not getting specific about what we're doing, obviously, but if you're a team that says, I'm looking for a zone blocking, say, center, well, his characteristics and his, I'd say, skill set is going to be a lot different than someone who's going to be more of a gap or man blocking scheme.
Can I ask you, because that's what I'm trying to get at, not what you're going to do scheme-wise, but what's the difference between what you would look for in a center that is in a zone compared to a center that's in a man scheme?
Yeah. So if you're in a zone scheme, you want a quicker, more athletic player. Okay. Those guys have to really reach to the 3 technique, if not further down the line, and have to be more athletic in space compared to some of the man guys who might be a little bit bigger, a little bit more physical. You're going to give up a little bit in terms of athleticism. Does that answer, Matt?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was asking.
Yeah.
You said a couple times that you know you like to judge draft classes 2 years later. I know some people use 3 years, and obviously people want instant gratification out of early picks. But why 2 years for you? Why is that a good judge? I guess of.
I would say nowadays in the NFL, with the practice limitations that we have due to the current CBA, our practices are so much limited. So I think to give a guy a year in an NFL system with a full process of OTAs, rookie minicamps, training camp season, and then into the following September is really giving the guy a chance, because there's very few players that are going to come in and just, you guys can probably count them on 2 hands that come in and just be impact players from day one. And I think college football is very, very different than pro football. So I think that also kind of contributes into the evaluation process. Some positions are easier than others to evaluate and kind of project to the NFL. But I think guys just need some time.
How does that change with a new staff, a new scheme in some places too? Does that matter in terms of the time you give them to?
No, I think that always stays constant. Listen, there's going to be coaching and scheme changes. Like, a third of the league's going to change every year, whether it's coaches, whether it's rosters, roster management. So, yeah, that doesn't change for me.
You didn't necessarily make big splash signings in free agency, at least dollar amounts or whatever. Do you view the draft as where you can get a game changer, playmaker type, as opposed to free agency, or is that just the way it worked this year?
I think it's the way it worked this year. I think there's plenty of playmakers or game changers, as you call them, in the draft at all levels, really. So I think price-wise, it's much more better way to do it is do it in the draft, because the premium positions in free agency, as you guys know, the prices are getting way up there. So you really have to make conscious decisions of where you're going to make investments in terms of free agency, and then really kind of fill in the gaps when it comes to the draft and kind of hopefully take the best player on the board.
So generally, free agent, do you think it's more of a depth-building vehicle as opposed to the draft?
It changes year to year. It really depends on what your roster is at the end of the season. When you're getting into mid-February, you're going to the combine, talking to agents about upcoming UFAs, and you got to really look at the market and say, well, position 1 might have a ton of guys in free agency, so maybe you can get one of those guys at a reasonable cost. Or if 1 year there's only 2 guys at the top, those 2 guys are going to get overpaid, and unless you have to have them, you probably don't want to do that from a roster building standpoint. So you got to look at the draft and say, all right, what's heavy in the draft? So that's something we do in February quite a bit, is looking at the draft board, where are we heavy, where are we light, and then look at the free agent board and just do the same thing.
Bob, where you come from historically, New England, during your time there, front 7 was a big emphasis in the first round. I think it was like 8 or 15 first-round picks. Why was that? Is there a specific philosophy there that you carried over to where you are front 7 is?
I'm trying to think who I've taken in the last couple of years, and then been 1 front 7 player, 2, Ashawn and JD. Yeah. No, nothing specific. I think that was the philosophy that they had there. I don't think that's exactly my philosophy.
You only have 6 picks in the first round. What challenge
in the draft?
I'm sorry.
I wish in the 6th round, Carlos. Great.
If you want to confirm something, but what does that do as far as challenging? Does it handcuff you? Do you need to trade back and get more picks? How do you approach that?
I think we're going to kind of take it as it comes in the first round and see what's there in the teens and evaluate what our options are. I'm always in the business of getting more draft picks if I can. I think I said that in January. When were we? March, down in Florida. Seems like about 3 months ago. I'm always in the business of getting more draft picks. I think that's just good for business. The more you get, the more you're going to hit on. If we can acquire more picks, that would be something I'd look forward to. If there's a player that I really like at 20, I'm going to have no hesitation in taking them.
When it comes to the draft day trades, how much of that groundwork can you lay now, talking to teams, getting a feel for what they're looking for?
You can get a feel. I mean, very few get done this early, obviously. So what we do is we call around to the other teams, a couple members of my staff, and kind of just make a composite list of, hey, talk to team X and Y. They both want to maybe move up, but they're at 31 and whatever, 37, and they kind of give me some scenarios, and we talk about that early next week. But it's really an information gathering session right now, I'd say, in the next 4 or 5 days.
Chris, you got just to follow up on the picks one more time, you have the gap in the 6th round there, so you go 84 picks or something without one. Does that
it's gonna be quite boring.
Change the focus at all? I mean, do you want to be in every round? Is there added desperation to find us when you have a hole like that?
No, there's no desperation. I mean, would I like to have a 6th round pick? Absolutely. But we don't, so we deal with what we have. And if we can acquire more, great. If not, what we'll do is, get ourselves organized for the 7th round and, post-draft.
You're picking 20th this year. You picked 21st last year with Davis and 16 for Decker. Being familiar with that range of pick, is that advantageous to you in any way?
Actually, that's a good question. We actually talked about that a couple of days ago, in that we're in that similar ballpark. So there's always the guys that are going to go before you, right? You can sit there and say, all right, here's whatever, 10 guys, 12 guys. Under no circumstance they're getting to you, right? And then there's, okay, well, here's another 8, say, that, all right, out of those 8, which ones do we like? Because there's a chance. And then there's also that third group is, we know these guys are going to be there. Do we wait? Do we trade back? So it is actually a pretty good, 3 years in a row kind of in the same ballpark. It helps me a little bit, I'd say.
Matt's talked a lot about.
Matt doesn't talk a lot.
At times, get up for an hour for breakfast. But just the importance of having multiple fronts, versatile defensive linemen. Just looking at your roster now and what he's saying there, does that give you a wider range of defensive lineman skill sets you can target in the draft? I guess not eliminating, just a smaller percentage of players.
I'd say it's probably about the same number that we've had here the last couple of years. Listen, I know the scheme's going to be a little different, but players are players. And I think what all good coaches do is put players in their best position to make plays and be productive. So, looking at the draft board, I think those front 7 guys are probably the same number of players that we've been picking from the last couple of years.
Why sign Matt Castle?
He's a good quarterback.
Well, you said something that were you looking maybe for more of a veteran? Were you not happy with everything that Jake did, or?
We're trying to add competition at every roster spot, every position group on the team. So there's nothing, since I've gotten here, nothing's been given to any player. There's probably like a handful of guys that know are going to be here, right, for the long haul. So if I can add competition into any position meeting room that's down the hall there, that's my job. So, Jake's played in, I think, how many NFL games? 1. So Jake's good. I like Jake, but my job is to add competition across the roster.
Was anything that dependent on what happened with the Eagles, with Foles, and with the Vikings, and just you have to have something just in case? Or?
No, just my our thought of like what we wanted to add to the room and add to the competition. So nothing that another team did, really forced us to make that call.
Signing like Eric Blunt, how much does that impact your drafting strategy, do you think?
It could impact it a little bit. I think, if we had to go play a football game today, I think we have enough running backs to be competitive. Now, is that saying I'm not going to take one? I don't know. Tell me who's going to be on the board in the, 2nd, 3rd, 4th round. I don't know.
This kind of goes along.
I know you've been waiting.
Can you talk about the information sharing between Coach Patricia and the staff, and how you guys is getting ready for the draft? Do you share stuff? Does he say guys that he likes? How does that all work?
Yeah, without getting too specifics, what I do, and this year was a little different because the coaching staff got here, relatively late. So I didn't want to, and they're trying to put a playbook together. They're trying to learn our players. So it was a different dynamic this year for sure. So what I tried to do was kind of narrow down their lists of guys that I wanted them to evaluate. And I definitely narrowed down the list of who I wanted them to go see at a workout or a pro day. So that was a little bit different this year. But I think, between the guys that we're going to consider, Matt has watched, Matt has opinions on. He's a good evaluator. So I think probably not quite as, I'd say, extensive with the coaches this year, just by circumstance. I think next year when we get back into it, they'll be as involved as the previous staff was.
This one sort of ties in with what Bob was asking, but just how has the running back position evolved during your time, you know, in the NFL? It seemed like there was a while there where nobody took them high, and then the last couple of years there's been some really good ones that have gone high. How does that sort of, you know, dynamic, I guess, change how you guys view the running back position in the draft?
Yeah, you know what, Dave, I haven't really studied the history of that, to be honest, but I'd say going back when I was in New England, we took, I think we took Lawrence Maroney at the end of the first round. Then we took a guy like James White, who was a really good player, I think, in the 4th round. So, and then we had a couple, you know, rookie free agents that played a lot of football for us back in the day. You know, Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis, to throw a name out there, you guys probably don't even know. Guys like that. So I think you can get them in all shapes and sizes. You can get them early, mid, late. I think it's really, you know, my job and my staff's job is to kind of just get the best guy at the right time. And whenever that is, you know, if it is this year, then great.
Is there value in taking a running back in the first round still?
If he's graded high enough.
Do you think you're taking high enough right now?
Say again?
Do you think you're taking high enough right now to take a running back in the first round?
Maybe.
Who would you take number 1 in this draft?
If I was drafted number 1. I don't want to say anything in case I trade up.
Fair.
Is that fair? All right, last one.
Last question. You brought in several free agents, and they're signed to one-year deals. I'm wondering how that factors into your evaluation process at those positions come the draft.
Yeah, it's similar to what somebody asked over here earlier. That all factors in. All right, what do we have at the position? What are their lengths of their contract? So that definitely kind of factors into what we think our internal needs are. So it's something we talk about when we sign guys. Hey, we're signing this guy to a one-year deal. Like, we might have to address this at some point. So.
The length of the guy or how he fits into the scheme here, so that you can have the flexibility in the draft?
Well, I'd say, you know, in free agency, I think negotiations go as a two-way street. So just because we came to an agreement on a one-year deal, maybe we wanted a 2 or 3 or 4, but the agent was like, hey, listen, he really wants to come to your place, but, you know, we'd rather do a one-year deal. So it's all case by case on that.
All right.
See you guys.
Thanks a lot, Bob.
Thanks, Bob. Thursday night.